All right, well, I kind of got bored. And then I said I was thinking about a lot of stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm just gonna do this just to kind of lay out my thoughts. I'll probably private this later because kind of wanted to be able to place my thoughts somewhere. Right? Um, I kind of had this. I think we'll watch this first because I think this will kind of help me be able to explain what I mean in a minute. But I'm going to go through this video, then I'm going to kind of express or explain what I mean or how you'll say it in a minute. But anyways, we're going to move through this video for a minute, and I'm probably, we'll see. My brain's kind of everywhere because I'm philo sperging right now. Now, I've got the philosophy wheels a turning in my brain, and they just won't stop right now.
I was ridiculous. That man was I. Have you ever had the sense that life is empty or meaningless? Have there been times where you just cannot seem to care about the world anymore? Where continuing to struggle and strive seems completely pointless, and that it might be better just to give up entirely? Well, in the mid-19th century, Russian author Fyodor Dostoevsky was pondering the implications of just such a mental state. He became fascinated with a swathe of people taking their own lives all across Russia, and he wrote The Dream of a Ridiculous Man to explore the inner workings of someone who just does not know how to go on, and how he thought such nihilism could be conquered. Spoilers ahead. The tale follows the eponymous...
And this is something, there is, as an atheist for like the majority of my life, nihilism is still something that's pretty like deep rooted within me. That is a very difficult thing to get rid of, but it is. I don't think nihilism is good. Like, can't be good at all. It's never going to be. But it is. There are concepts within it that I think can be repurposed, I guess. And in this way, that I try to repurpose some of the things that I used to think of. There's like it makes like a lot of the bleakness of what world like I think a lot of the what meaninglessness is ultimately what is the world itself. Like, I think that there are parts within where we are in this existence right now that can be good and should be pursued. But I don't know, and this is the problem with having these nihilistic things with still kind of rooted within me, is that I don't know if they actually matter. They're just assumptions that I make that I try to connect dots through the new kind of ideology I've managed or personal philosophy that I've managed to create. Yeah, there, Emmett. It is, you know, usually a lot of this stuff. We'll just go through the video a little bit more because I'm drifting.
ridiculous man who has become convinced that nothing matters, and therefore he may as well die. On his way home to commit the deed, he comes across a small child in the street and thoughtlessly ignores her cries for help, chasing her away instead. He is tormented with guilt over this cruel action and falls into a deep sleep, dreaming that he is dead and has been transported to another world, where all people innocently love one another and everyone is happy and at peace. But he introduces the concept of lying into this world and watches as it slowly falls apart, taking on all the flaws of our reality and breaking into violent, warring factions.
You see, that's a. All right, I had to take a drink, but that is kind of where, because as I was like reading through bits of this, I didn't read the whole book yet, but I'm probably going to. Because sometimes I'll just like skip through parts of a book to really understand. This is something that I kind of like this is, kind of where I am at in life at this point, where there is this assumption that nothing actually really matters. The only thing that really matters is trying to attain this sort of innocent type of love that can exist even within a world where it's kind of filled with a bunch of liars, right? And I think the only way that you can really do that right is have this ability that you have to learn to be able to just accept that the reason why these people are the way they are is not necessarily their fault, and that they're living in this type of meaninglessness as well that they can't really grasp with, and they take meanings that kind of take them away from being able to be that innocent type of loving person, right? And within that, because before there was this idea that there was nothing. This is kind of the fucked up way that I was thinking before I became a Christian, right? I used to think that there was nothing actually that differentiated much between love and hate at all. I thought that they were almost like the same thing because it was impossible for me to care about anybody without at some point hating them. And like that's changed now where I don't hate anybody. And I understand that those are two completely separate concepts and that the hate that I felt was actually twisting my ability to love something or to love someone. And it was a very difficult thing. It actually completely, you could actually go back to a lot of the times where I first started coming up on panels and you could see like how shattering that concept was for me. Because I actually, like, I'm mostly back to what I used to be before, but when all that stuff occurred, my mind was completely shattered and destroyed. I wasn't able to control myself emotionally at all. I wasn't able to. It was like all the walls and all the dams that kept me in control were just gone. And it wasn't like a mental hysteria or anything. It was just like there's just nothing. There's just nothing there. All the guardrails are just gone. And it was an interesting time because in that state, I was able to be more innocently loving for a long time. And it is, I think, more difficult for that to be the case now. But, anyways, I'm going to play through the video a little bit more. Because
Suddenly awakes and finds he has a new lease on life and a new purpose to bring about the utopia he saw in his dream and guard it with his life. Get ready to learn how logic alone will lead us into self-destruction, why you cannot run from your own conscience, and how there is something uniquely noble about pursuing the impossible. This is one of Dostoevsky's richest and also most symbolic works. So more than ever, please bear in mind that this is just my interpretation. And if you take
yes,
something
we get it.
completely different from the story, that is absolutely fine. But with that out of the way, let's peer into the mind of despair. 1. The tragedy of reason. The classic philosophical question is, for what reason? It can be found in everyone from Plato to Leibniz, and it has carried us a long way. The wish to look for rational explanations for how events have come to pass, the urge to justify our own actions, and the drive to break more and more things down into logical components has served us incredibly well. It brought us the Enlightenment, modern medicine, and
Oh God, don't talk about the Enlightenment.
advanced mathematics, all things I'm very grateful for. But Dostoevsky wants to add a counterpoint to all of these benefits. He urges us not to seek perfect reason in every aspect of our lives, or else we will lose the dearest parts of our humanity.
And I think that's kind of why, uh, because as I was listening to this video too, then I decided to read a few bits and pieces of the story that Dostoevsky wrote. And that right there was kind of where I kind of realized, I think maybe I've reasoned myself out of that state where I can forgive people, right? But I'm not able to truly grasp what reason, or that I can't grasp for what reason that I would do that. So to a certain extent, it makes me bitter towards that person. Even though I'm supposedly forgiving them, I'm still bitter, and I still don't want to interact or be around those people. And in that kind of state, it kind of makes it impossible for me to like enjoy interactions with people, because I'm getting to this point where, I just kind of expect to not have people around at a certain point. And within that, I hold on to this kind of idea. Well, we'll get into that idea later, but within that whole idea of the tragedy of like, I agree with them to a certain extent that this is, like what he's explaining there, is a true thing where you almost have to become unreasonable in the way that you try to understand what forgiveness and love is. You can't reason your way through it, because you end up scattering it around in a bunch of different pieces, and then you begin to actually be able to do the thing.
The driving force behind the ridiculous man's misery is his nihilism. But this is not the hedonistic nihilism that is sometimes found in Dostoevsky's characters and in wider literature. Instead, it simply robs our protagonist of the motivation to do anything. In some sense, he is a much more extreme nihilist than a mere egoist or hedonist, because while they might reject any sort of higher meaning, they still implicitly value something, their own pleasure or pain. But the ridiculous man is different. He acknowledges that he feels pain and that his physical sensations exist, but they don't seem to have much motivational tug on him. His disposition is such that only a rational meaning, independent from him or any other person, will throw him into action. Robbed of this, he simply sees no reason to carry on. He is not thrust into suicidality by some cataclysmic events that have made his life.
Before like this it gets implicated, like I'm not talking about like I don't feel like that.
Unbearably unpleasant, but is rather carried there one step at a time through the cold light of reason and the stubborn refusal to turn to anything else. His condition reminds me of Albert Camus' concept of the absurd. The absurd is not the lack of objective meaning in the universe, but rather how this interacts with our innate hunger for such meaning. It is the suffering caused by the interaction of our primal search for a logical purpose in our lives, and the universe's rejection of this humble dream. The ridiculous man strikes me as someone with a particularly potent desire for objective meaning. And so when he cannot discover this by use of reason, he falls into existential despair. It is important to note here that Dostoevsky is not anti-reason. He is instead making the
And I actually think that whole concept right there is actually a problem within society right now, right? It's a problem within, like once you remove like the grounding of any type of philosophy, which is God, which God grounds all philosophy. even within the atheistic type of philosophy. Okay. Well, sorry, my job just texted me to make sure that I actually showed up to work. But but shit, what was I thinking about? Oh, I got fucked up. I got messages from a whole bunch of people. Abe is rating me. I mean, he can. This is kind of a depressing stream right now. Kind of lost it. I appreciate it. But there's this I mean, a lot of those people, especially hell, I'll deal with it when it happens. What was I even thinking about? I had this concept, whatever. I lost it. We'll continue forward.
Observation, but we can't let reason be the only guiding force in our lives. Man cannot live on logic alone. Rationality is a fantastic way to answer how questions, but it often falls short in answering why questions. It can teach us how to build a steam engine, but it can't say why a steam engine would be desirable. It can chart the path to water, but it can't tell us why we should bother to drink. Part of what makes our protagonist so ridiculous, even at the beginning of the tale, is that he is clinging to
Well, undepressing. Well, I can try. We'll see. I mean, it's not depressing because I'm in a depressed mood or anything. It's kind of deeper trying to understand whatever. We're going through it.
the logic to tackle a question it was never designed to answer. It is a fantastic tool to help us achieve an aim, but it needs this aim in order to function, or else it will flounder, not knowing where to point its conditional arrows. And this is not some airy-fairy position.
Oh, I remember now. Like I think this is a lot of the problem within society right now is that within what grounds philosophy, God always grounds philosophy, even if it's like a Platonistic type of philosophy or a Christian type of philosophy. It's all grounded within this concept of something eternal, right? You have to have something eternal that grounds anything. So even when an atheist will say that, well, the universe has just existed forever, or there's multiverses that constantly interact and change each other, it's still what up, people from Babe. But even within that, right, there's still something that has to be eternal that grounds any type of philosophy. And within that, but when you try to remove that, all right, when you try to remove any type of grounding from philosophy, you end up figuring out that there's absolutely no meaning. And even within some of the even within some of the fuck, what is it called? Even within the other types of philosophy, right? If you ground it in like an eternal universe, it's just constantly self-repeating and it's infinite and there's nothing. I mean, it ultimately leads to a conclusion that yeah, everything is meaningless. Most things, most philosophies lead to nihilism, unless you have something conscious there that gave you purpose. There has to be something eternal that gave you purpose for you not to end up in nihilism. Show us some H-Man art. I don't know about that. That was some crap. We don't have anybody slurring Walmart words right now.
Even David Hume, perhaps one of the most no-nonsense philosophers in history, used to say that reason was a slave to the passions. In Dostoevsky's mind, our narrator has been misled by the extreme utility of logic to believe that it alone can solve any issue. But this is just not true. It cannot solve existential questions by itself any more than it can paint a great work of art or hammer a nail. Sure, it will be involved in the process, but it is not the only piece of the puzzle. At least, this is what Dostoevsky seems to think. It is also this sole devotion to reason that causes the ridiculous man to treat the child so cruelly. We explicitly see inside his thought process, and in his own words, "If I was going to kill myself in 2 hours' time, then what did I care about that little girl?" And this makes perfect sense. If you're going to die pretty much immediately, then almost everything would seem completely pointless. After all, you aren't going to be around to suffer the consequences. Your entire world is about to blink out of existence. And surely, if the world was going to end in a couple of hours, then it would only be sentimentality that would make us care what went on in these final moments.
Yeah, and within that type of concept, right? Shit, I already lost. I lost track of what I was saying. I saw H-Man art and I got distracted. Gay points. Oh, counterpoints looks busy later. Scheduled debates on Speakeasy. Yeah. Also, if it could have a different meaning for those who like anime, yeah. I mean, it have a pretty degenerate meaning.
What makes the short story so interesting is that the ridiculous man has made a mistake. His reasoning is airtight, his perspective makes perfect sense. He is clever, he is logical, and he is wrong, because he is affected by his cruel actions. And that is just what we're going to look at next. If you want to help me make more videos like this, then consider subscribing to either my email list or my Patreon. The links are in the description. 2. The vicious conscience. Throughout history, there have been many ways people have tried to
Let me go
make
back a little bit because I'm trying to re-grasp what I was thinking.
to be around to suffer the consequences. Your entire
right. Within that whole idea, right? Without some sort of conscious creator, you eventually have no, there's no ability to obtain any sort of reason. So you can logic your way into understanding that, right? But it doesn't actually, I don't think it makes you really understand it. The only way to truly understand something is to experience it. So you can't debate somebody. I don't think you can ever debate somebody into believing certain things. You can logic them into understanding the necessity of it to a certain level, but you can't make them able, you can't logic them into understanding it, right?
Description. 2. The vicious conscience. Throughout history, there have been many ways people have tried to make sense of human conscience. Some ancient Greek thinkers thought of it like a lesser deity that would alert us when we're about to make a moral error, while some church fathers believed it to come straight from God himself. But one of my favourite representations of conscience is as a special form of torture. In Edgar Allan
Okay,
Poe's
it's
Telltale
just settle
Heart,
down. It's a fucking special kind of okay. And we're going to Edgar Allan Poe. Let's listen to him when it comes to this. But anyways, and within, but I mean, once you have this idea, right, and you understand, shit, what was I talking about? I completely forgot what I was talking about again because I got distracted by Emmett's love of degenerate stuff. Yeah, thanks, Abe. I appreciate you. But yeah, give a fucking Emmett with his. Oh God, Emmett, quit watching anime. You need to stop.
this manifests as an unbearable heartbeat ringing in the murderer's ears, while in Shakespeare's Macbeth it becomes the hallucination of bloodstains that can never be washed away. Here, conscience is not a gentle corrective force, but more like a stalking beast, tracking you through the dark night of your misdeeds and burying its teeth into the deepest recesses of.
Well, even within this idea that this conscience comes to you from God, even within the Christian religion, this type of idea would still be somewhat true, wouldn't it? There would still be, you have this conscience and you understand morality based on what has been ingrained in you from God, but you would also have what would be the demons within Christian, within Christian type of philosophy that are just actual demons. If you are Christian, it would be an actual demon. But anyways, you would still have that you would still have the demons that if you were to not live up to that conscience that God had gave you, that they would be trying to torture you. I mean, that is something that would happen if within the Christian worldview, right? And I was saying that as if I'm separate from that, but within that, yeah, I just do that because I don't try to make myself sound authoritative on any of this.
Of your soul. And in Dostoevsky's short tale, it suddenly throws the narrator's worldview into question. The ridiculous man arrives home and sits down, but he feels his conscience gnawing at his side. He cannot make sense of this. Why would he feel guilty about being cruel to a child when he had already decided to end his own life and nothing even mattered in the first place? The ridiculous man has failed to realize that however much he may think that rationality is the solution to every problem, he is not a perfectly reason-guided being, and his emotions have...
Cat is the most degen in chat. I don't know about that. You're still a, what was it, a goth stoic? Yeah. Goth stoic cutie. That's what you are, Emmett.
something to say about...
It's pretty degenerate.
His careless behaviour. He suddenly feels like he cannot shoot himself just yet, not until he has solved the issue of his guilt and put his affairs of conscience back in order. It is at this moment where the ridiculous man drifts off into a dream where he has already committed his fatal deed and is now expired. There he encounters a world he describes as...
Thank you for the censorship. Jesus Christ. I almost got jump scared there.
Would be like without sin or selfishness. He describes people living in perfect harmony, overflowing with love at one another's presence. The ridiculous man explores this world and is in awe at the paradise on display. It is like heaven, but there is nothing directly supernatural going on. Rather, it is a heaven on earth, with the bountiful joy being brought by the sinless characters of...
Well, within that idea, though, it's kind of... I think everyone would be able... We're about to make a fucking appeal to majority, whatever. I think for most people's in their experience would be able to understand that that idea of being able to achieve a perfect world like that in the state that we're in is almost impossible. It's like a 99. It's like a 99 to the most extreme amount of nines possible, and logically possible, just not ever gonna happen. Pretty much, at least not within what we have as real. Because but anyways, they're within that idea that is something that you can hold on to, right? That idea that if you could just achieve this, and honestly, you don't even have to achieve it worldwide, right? You just have to achieve it within like a small family, within a group of people. You'd only have to have that achieved in the small level. And I think that you could live a type of heaven on earth, right? There might be things outside of it that I think this is ultimately what I've come to understand. It is just my opinion of what the church is, right? Is it's kind of like this gated off place where that can occur. And that's kind of like a lot of the things that I read before when I was trying to figure out what I thought would be true. Like I already been given, like supernatural signs or whatever that this was true, but I tried to find logical reasoning through it. But that idea has always been consistent for so long throughout what I understand of as the Orthodox Church. So the man had a lamp. Oh yeah, it's the same dude. I'm based as fuck. I don't know, you're stoic. Kind of gay. But but so I think that that's kind of like the ultimate goal. How do you change society? once you've come to this understanding and you want people to be a part of that, what you do is you convert. I think that, and that's where ultimately, like, my whole ideology kind of roots from, is this idealistic, grouping of people within a small scale that could grow outward. Oh yeah. Well, let me try to deal with something in the background real quick. All right, I'm back. But yeah, cast takes aren't fucking retarded. But yeah, and you know, something I'll just say real quick is like Voltaire. Like, I think that you know, I appreciate you being here, but we have to have a talk before we can all be like a group of friends again. But you know, but yeah, we have to have. I have to have a talk with you, but at some point I'll do that offline though. But how does society change you, and how do you hold on to what's important? The way that, well, the way that society changes you right now is it twists you into being able to not being innocent anymore, right? It makes you, from a child, being able to have this idea of just selfless love, and it kind of takes it away from you over the course of time. At least that's what I think. But I think what happens within, uh, but I think what happens, but the way that you hold on to what is important is that you just hold on to it and you just apply it, and you don't get lazy and try not to do it. You just keep you keep doing the thing. Change the world. Begin with, yeah. You know, position, cure yourself. Is still a kind of important concept. You have to be able to go through the process of being like that idealistic thing that you want the world to be, and then try to apply it.
The people that lived there. They are described as possessing a sort of wisdom that the narrator cannot put into words, a sublime selflessness that he cannot completely understand. But this situation was not to last. The narrator inadvertently taught these innocent people how to lie, and it was all downhill from there. Once they learnt dishonesty, they grew to mistrust one another, splitting off into factions. Once there were factions, there was war. And once there was war, any hope of reclaiming their innocence was lost forever. The ridiculous man watches all of this with weeping. His guilty conscience has infected an entire species, and now they are all victims of his final act of cruelty towards this young girl. This dream has been interpreted and reinterpreted by hundreds of readers because it is so rich in meaning. It has clear theological undercurrents, a view of human nature that is both deeply optimistic and harshly pessimistic, and a powerful warning about how little it takes to turn a contented community into a violent, factional dystopia. But I interpret it, at least partly, as a great metaphor for the dominance of our conscience. The narrator introducing lying into this naive paradise is very similar to what happens when we commit an action that flies in the face of everything we value.
Within this idea too is like it really only takes like a handful of people, or just one person even, really, to kind of twist it. So it does, and you know, it only takes one person to kind of twist this. And once you keep, if you were to keep somebody within that kind of sphere, it would ultimately corrupt it and destroy it, right? No talk needed. It is what it is. I'm here or not, or I'm not. Well, if you don't want to talk, then you know, I don't know what you even mean.
The guilt and shame slowly.
I think you maybe think that um what I want to talk to you about is probably something. It doesn't matter. What I want to talk to you about is probably not even what you think I want to talk about.
Spreads through our mind, filling every nook and cranny with its putrid fumes, until we are forced to either make peace with what we've done or continue to run from it, its snapping jaws ever at our heels, and its innumerable tendrils only one day away from dragging us into misery. And just as there is no clear logical sequence from the ridiculous man arriving in this paradise to the people learning to lie and their eventual moral downfall, there is a certain irrationality that guides our conscience. It is a terrifyingly chaotic force, which sometimes goes quiet enough to make us believe we have moved past our transgressions, and at other times howls in our ear so loudly we are convinced it will never stop. One moment it is content, the next it pounces. It is both the angel on our shoulder and the knife at our back. It can bring out the best of us through its righteous torment, and in a moment it can snatch away our peace of mind. Our protagonist's fatal error was believing that this eldritch beast could be tamed through logic and reason, when we are often simply at its mercy, and there is nothing we can do apart from comply with its demands. It is lucky then.
Yeah, and I kind of, disagree with that. I think you can struggle against those types of things. It just, whether you're successful or not kind of depends on, kind of just depends on where you're at, the kind of grouping you're in. I would say probably should be in the church. Anyways, kind of want to move on to something else because I'm like, now I'm drifting off. So I'm not going to be able to read chat and do this. So let me find something else. But I do think that ultimately what we have to understand is that there is an idyllic state of things. And I think that that ultimately is just love, right? Just infinite selfless, or just a state of selfless, complete love. And I think that the only way to really accomplish that is in the small scale within the current state of the world that we're in. And you can logic your way into finding where that place is. You just can't understand what it is until you experience it. But let's see. I know what I could do. Hold on. I was philo sperging when I was. I can't philo sperg and read chat at the same time, so I'm going to do something else. You too, Abe. Sorry, I wasn't. I was actually only planning to stream for like an hour and just kind of go through that whole process. But now I'm trying to find something to do to go on a little bit longer. So I just, but let's see. Um, trying to find Tomahawk in First Amenders debate, but I can't fucking find it for some reason. All right, maybe it just wasn't posted as a whole video. Let me see if I can. I mean, I could go through First Amender's fucking stream, but good lord, dude, like that, his streams are so fucking boring, dude. I will fall asleep on stream. Here we go. I found it. And the reason I kind of want to go through this is, like, I'm not going to go through every little bitty detail because I actually do think I'm going to prepare to actually debate First Amender specifically on this topic for one day, maybe within this year or some point, whenever I actually feel like doing it. But
redlining.
so this is Tomahawk. He goes on VK. And I don't know if he goes anywhere else, but I see him on VK a lot. He's he's pretty decent at debating. I think that he's not really aggressive enough to really debate First Amendment because First Amendment is you just kind of have to beat him in the ground and make him spurg because that's what's fun. But it is we'll go through this a little bit.
So the question is, does systemic racism exist? A debate with First Amender. And you can find me on youtube.com/at First Amender. You could check out my channel and consider subscribe. What is systemic racism? Systemic racism are racial disparities that are produced and maintained by institutions, laws, and policies and social systems, even when nobody is intending to discriminate.
All right, so systematic racism, a racial disparity that are produced by and maintained by institutional law, policy, and social, even when nobody is intending to discriminate. So, within this definition, you could literally make systematic racism against anybody for any reason at any time for whatever reason you decide. It's kind of a really broad kind of definition. It makes it doesn't even actually show how it would be bad to have these things, right? This doesn't even in this definition give any sort of negativity to why this would be bad or why it would be something that shouldn't happen. Because this, if it does not require intention, then it kind of removes racism like from it, because racism is an intentional act, right? So if you're removing intention from racism, it kind of kind of contradicts itself a little bit to me.
social systems, even when nobody is intending to discriminate. It's all about outcomes. Intent does not matter. Imagine that there is a system built decades ago with openly racist rules. Even if you remove the racist language later, the effects can still persist.
But if, okay, so you could say, okay, so this is kind of like retarded, right? As there's a system built decades ago with openly racist rules, even if you remove, okay, so if you were to have a building that has, you know, you can only drink at this water fountain and use this bathroom or go into this classroom or whatever, or if you're a certain type of race, and then you remove just the race part of that, then it would just be you can only use this based on you could just only use this based on probably gender, right? So it might. I don't see how. Okay, let me try to think. Imagine the system built decades ago with openly racist. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense because it would just later the effect can still okay, so can still persist.
Example. Race was barred
That's
from
what I was
owning
missing.
property
Sorry,
in
I'm
certain
tired.
areas, such as HOA restricting minorities in predominantly white neighborhoods, as well as redlining laws. Property ownership is the main way that wealth is accumulated. Wealth determines the school, the neighborhoods, the credit, as well as.
But even with the can, right? This is so like this argument is so broad that I don't know if there's any type of real conversation you could have with this, except just explaining how this is okay. This exists, but it's not bad. So he's created this definition that's so broad and overarching that it does. There's not really any way that you can tackle his definition of what this is. You would just have to say that okay, well, this is bad. This exists, but it's bad. So this is probably yeah. So this is because of the prompt. The systematic. That's why it's the most broad argument he can make for the prompt. So yeah, at this point, Tomahawk shouldn't even like actually worry about the prompt. He should just concede the prompt and debate the rhetoric. Just go on the rhetoric of why this is stupid.
Political power. The detail. Redlining occurred nationwide. Redlining is the practice of denying people access to credit because of where they live, even if that they are personally qualified for loans. Historically, mortgage lenders once widely redlined core urban neighborhoods and black-populated neighborhoods in particular. The 1968 Fair Housing Act outlawed racially motivated redlining and tasked federal financial regulators, including the Federal Reserve, with enforcement. Redlining was found even after it was banned formally in 1968. Example, 50 years after being outlawed, redlining still drives neighborhood health inequities. Discriminatory lending practice continues to have serious effects. This is from the University of Berkeley of Public Health. Decades of redlining, a long-standing banking practice that blocked people out of color from getting mortgages, continue to perpetuate racial and socioeconomic inequality in the San Francisco Bay Area and across the country, according to ongoing research from UC Berkeley School of Public Health.
All right, so the argument is since there was redlining, you created a very impoverished zone of place, and you limit these people from racially being able to move outside of these red line districts. So, what that would mean is that would have to automatically be negative. You could, but because those places are bad now, that has to be because of the redlining. So is it bad? Is it bad to redline people if that redlining district is actually a decent place to live? Probably not. Like I don't understand what exactly it is that he thinks he's proving here. Besides, well, it's bad because they did this, and now those places are bad. Is it because of the redlining, or is it because of the culture there? That's kind of the problem, right?
Redlining exists and existed, but so what? Well, education. The school you went to from K through 12 is associated with the district.
Okay, so he's going to blame crime, single parent households, and all that stuff on education. Um, so within that idea, you could have so within that idea, like I don't think that it necessarily even has to be the education itself. It would be the cultural standard that's there, right? You could have a red line district with a school for that district that maybe wasn't the best, but ultimately had a culture in which provided moral structure that prevented things from, like, robbery or killing or whatever. You could have that there without education really being necessary. You don't have to be an outrageously intelligent person to understand if you steal, bad thing happen. So yeah, I don't.
District that you grew
So,
up in.
so the education part isn't necessarily the most stable type of argument that you could make for redlining being bad.
A majority of funding for K through 12 public schools overwhelmingly comes from local property taxes. In 2021 school year,
Whether they did not. Maybe people kind of sucked. Yeah.
around
Yeah.
44.1% of public school funding came from states. The total funding of the source per student you could observe local and state is overwhelming majority of where funding comes from, which means a majority of your funding is in fact property taxes. Education continued. School.
You know what? I've actually decided. I was sitting here thinking, and yeah. See you, Voltaire. I think I'm just done with you. But anyways, sorry.
Schools are funded through property taxes, and property taxes are garnered based on a percentage of the total value of the home appraised by the government, often lower than its actual perceived market value. If a property tax is, say, 4%, one house is worth $125,000 versus a home worth $1.2 million. That is a huge difference in how much funding is allocated. $48,000 in yearly property tax versus $5,000 in a poorer district. This means poorer districts fundamentally receive less money, and therefore worse education.
What happened to my old Minecraft videos? They're gone. Disappeared into the ether.
Depending on the zip code that they are born in. The impact of redlining. Poor K through 12 education means minorities often underperform in terms of educational attainment. Why? Because opportunity was removed from them at the time of birth.
Okay, so let me go back for a second. I got distracted. If property tax more versus funding those. Okay, so because the place there doesn't have enough money, the school system itself would not have enough money. That means poor districts fundamentally. Okay, so they would have the worst education. They'd have worse education based on the amount of money that's given. That's not actually necessarily true, because you have a lot of places, that have a lot of money dumped into their education system, and it never even improved, and in some cases actually declined. Bring them back, please. I don't know. Like, they're like literally gone, and like I had a lot of them saved on a hard drive that's dead. So I don't know if I can bring them back.
Poorer districts fundamentally.
If you're talking about me playing Minecraft, I'm sure at some point I'll probably do that again.
Receive less money, and therefore worse education depending on the zip code that they are born in. The impact of redlining. Poor K through 12 education means minorities often underperform in terms of educational attainment. Why? Because opportunity was removed from them at the time of birth. No racist actor is required. Ask yourself.
Okay, so this whole thing revolves around, economics being the thing that make good thing happen. This his argument so far heavily relies on that if no money, no good. No good thing happen without money. Yeah, this is like we'll see if it gets any better. Discipline kind of a factor, better than money. Yeah, you can be a very poor person and live a pretty moral life, and you know you could be very poor. This whole idea that if you're poor, eventually you'll just rob to eat. Like, yeah, to a certain extent that can be true, but not within the culture that we live in, where you can literally you can eat very cheaply. Even with inflation that's happened now, you can eat very cheaply. Beans, rice, cornbread, pinto beans. These are things that you can make a big bulk of that are high calorie dense that you can eat, you could feed a family of for fairly cheaply. So it's not so much a I wouldn't even say it's an educational problem. It's just like you just don't fucking pay attention when you walk into the grocery store. And then you could say, well, you don't have access to that because of the grocery stores. Why don't you have access to those grocery stores? Because they were getting robbed and they were removed from those places. So then you could say, well, the only places that they do have access to are these little gas stations and little stores like that, and they're all super expensive. Why? Because they keep getting robbed and they keep getting things stolen from there, and they have to charge people extra for the things that get stolen. I lived that poor life as a kid. Yeah, I think a lot of people have. A lot of people live very poor lives where, you know, the snacks that you got was a saltine cracker and peanut butter if you were lucky. Not even a saltine cracker. It would be like some homemade fucking crackers that your grandparents made.
Self this. When you visit your Rosa Park drives
And
and
who drinks that damn Kool-Aid? I don't want to think I know about is Flavor Aid.
your Martin Luther King avenues across the country, not in 1969, but today, do you see an overwhelming amount of proportionate population to U.S. statistics? Or
When you visit your Rosa Park doctor and your Martin Luther King avenues across the country, not but today, do you see an overwhelming amount of proportionate population that you see? What do you think?
is it
Okay.
overwhelmingly minority?
Okay, so it's redlined, and because redlining, it means that no money was introduced to those redline districts. So, and because there's no money, no good can happen there. That's kind of the argument so far. I
Somehow
don't
situated in
understand.
that location. What do you think the cause of that is? Ergo,
Cultural. It's a cultural problem. The problem is that there is an inherent gang culture that's run rampant in those places. Does that mean that it's specifically because they are a certain race? No. A lot of people in the South understand that you roam into the wrong trailer park, you're going to get held up by uh, somebody looking for some crack or crystal. That's there's just places that have that happen, and it's not necessarily because of the economic or the monetary system or the monetary amount of it's not the amount of money that's there, it's the culture that's there. If you have a culture that revolves around drug use, yeah, it's going to kind of degenerate. If you have a culture derived around stealing is okay because the society itself hates you, so why should you care about the society that you live in? You should just take what you can get. Those two ideas completely destroys a culture, and that's kind of a rampant thing within those places.
if what I said is true, then systemic racism exists. And syllogistically, the definition of systemic racism exists if and only if a social system contains race based rules or inherited structure.
So this is okay. Systematic. Okay. Any system who rules are inherited structure predictable produce racial disparities and outcome independent of individual intent is systematic racism. Okay, so it's just using the definition like fucking twice. The U.S. housing education system contains inherent structures originally in redlining that predictably produce racial disparity. Well, okay, so within this argument, that broad definition that he's narrowed down as his argument, um, you could, yeah, you could debate that. You could actually crush that argument within the definition that he provided. That's okay. Yeah, you could still win that.
That predictably produce racial disparities in outcomes independent of individual intent.
All right, Cat, be safe. I just had chili with saltines and butter. Shit, butter and chili? I never thought of that before. Or are you talking about buttered saltines? Now I'm just thinking about butter and chili, and that actually sounds pretty good. We got $2 to go to the corner store. We could buy sweets or get quarters to play in the arcade. Yeah. Written by a guy that never starved once in his life. Well, yeah, but he can. I think that a lot of what people on the left do is they see, like, even eating fucking sandwiches, dude. Like, eating sandwiches is not that expensive. Like, you can eat like a couple sandwiches and like a handful of cheap store brand chips. It's fine. Like, it's not that crazy. No, you put the butter on the saltines and scoop the chili. Well, then you're still adding butter to the chili, just through the vessel of the saltine. So you might as well just put the butter in the chili. Butter and pinto beans, never had that either. But now that I think about it, that sounds good. Now I'm getting hungry. So yeah, within this argument, you could pick it apart, and yeah, Tomahawk could be easily able to destroy this.
Premise 1. Any system whose rules or inherited structures predictably produce racial disparities in outcomes independent of individual intent is systemically racist. The U.S. housing and education system contains inherited structures originating in redline that predictably produce racial disparities in educational outcomes independent of individual intent. Conclusion, therefore, systemic racism exists in the United States. Thank you. And you can follow me at youtube.com/@firstamender.
All right. You still had 5 minutes. Is that all you wanted to do there?
That's it. That's all I
All
needed.
right. Thank you for that opening.
Yeah, so that was, I mean, there were so many ways that he could have built up multiple arguments. That could have been one. But to have the entire debate lynch on that one syllogism is a complete fucking blunder, and you could absolutely decimate them based on that. Absolutely fucking crush him. And there would be nothing he could do but spurg his little rat face off. Right? He wouldn't be able to actually contend just with the little bit of pushback that I did. You know, I'm just saying how I do it, and it's delicious. Yeah, I'm just saying, man, you might as well just put some butter in there too. Put some butter in the chili and on the saltines. Double butter it. If you eat saltines, I know you're a real one. You don't need those saltines.
Statement. And with that, we are going to hand the mic over to Tomahawk. And Tomahawk, whenever you are ready for your opening statement, I will.
So at this point, I wouldn't even need an opening statement. I would just have had that syllogism written down and just poke holes through it for my opener. I wouldn't even bother with whatever written statement I have. Maybe I would still read some of it, but I wouldn't need to. That syllogism is terrible.
Start the timer up with your voice.
I'm a Mexican cheese blend in the chili. Get that cheese pull. I'm not a big fan of cheese, to be fair.
Right.
Maybe put more butter in it.
when one defines systemic racism, what often comes up is Black people oppressed, Black people without the opportunity to advance in society through education, career, or entrepreneurship, and how people of color historically did not have as much opportunity as white folk. My opponent brought up redlining. My opponent brings up the fact that property taxes are the ones that fund schools, but usually when you talk about those, when you
This is not okay. So he is doing what I would have done, but he's attacking it weird.
talk about these, when talking about
I think he's just nervous. Like, First Amender is kind of, he's not really a big deal, but he's been, in a lot of bigger debate places. So he's probably just nervous. But I don't know. He could have already had that syllogism destroyed by now.
planning like that, when talking about property taxes, it doesn't take into account those that escaped, those that those people who, even though they may come from they may come from those worse off towns, but they hardened themselves, and they brought up they through adversity they were able to move out of those bad, quote unquote, bad towns, those red line towns, into better neighborhoods, and then were able to still take part in those same resources and opportunities given to them by the better property counterparts. The opportunities are there.
And sorry, I know my Discord's going off. I can't actually mute that because I could, I guess, but I'm not going to.
And I would define it as racist. I would personally define it as racism on the level that is encouraged by the
cheese is goated. Oh, I guess it depends on what type of cheese, right? I mean, if it's goat cheese, technically it would be goated. But would that mean it's good? No. The only good cheese is American cheese. There, I said it. Canola oil and cheese only.
Institution to favor one race or ethnicity over another, similar to what my opponent brought up in terms of, you were born in it, so to speak. In this case, it would be like legislation, national through state, career, education, policing / enforcement. Pre-1964, the gatekeepers to almost all of the forms of influence and power in the United States were white people because, well, they were the majority ethnicity. They are still the majority ethnicity. Therefore, they're going to be able to, through their country and their settlers, they helped build the nation that we have today. You were treated better.
That was a joke. What was a joke? Elder line? Well, I mean, you can cope. It's all right.
If you were white, because
That's nasty. American cheese? No, American cheese is the best cheese. Every other country eats like fucking moldy, maggoty shit that they shovel in their mouths like the Neanderthal Europeans they are. Everyone in Europe needs to just fucking stop for a second. Think about what they're eating for just 5 seconds, and they'll realize how degenerate they're being. Fuck seed oil rubber cheese? Nah, seed oil rubber cheese is based.
well, that was normal. That was considered normal, and through slave.
British cheddar rocks. Never had it. I like mold taste. Well, then eat mold instead of cheese. Yeah, I don't really understand. Like at this point, his opening could have been done, and there would have been First Amendment would have been gasping for air for just simple little pushback.
Slaves, and through redlining and stuff, through slaves and the slavery and whatnot, you had the fact that those.
Where you think America learned to make cheese? In the chemical plants where they applied canola oil to fucking cheddar cheese that they made. So they did. They invented it. We invented American cheese. There's nothing else like it in the world.
Minorities would come into American society as a quote unquote lower class because they were not given the opportunity to essentially show what they could do. Post the Civil Rights Act of 1964, these differences were essentially legislated out, with the culture following suit over the next 3 decades through education. And through education, at that point, all resources, opportunities, places of business, entrepreneurship, you know, I
All right, like a lot of the stuff that he's talking about isn't even the argument that first. It's not really contending with what First Amender is saying. First Amender is saying it bad because no money. There's no money, so it bad. There's not money, bad. Money, no money, bad. That's the argument that First Amender's making. And I give him grace because this is, this, I've not even really debated somebody a whole lot. I've debated one person in an official debate, like but yeah, like the pushback is just like, why no money bad? Sometimes no money can be good. Sometimes money don't matter. Money don't matter sometimes.
became open to all citizens through the 14th Amendment, Brown versus Board of Education, which all culminated into the Civil Rights Act of 1964. At that point, like I said, all resources, opportunities based on creed became available to every American citizen from that day forth. You could not hire, fire, deny based on creed, sex, orientation, or race.
And see, let's give credit to the right wing people that have absolutely just fucking annihilated the majority of the left to just going no money equal bad. They've just been so absolutely decimated that this is the quality of arguments that most of these people kind of make. Is like, well, there's no money, so it's bad. There's not enough money, so it's bad. It could be better with more money.
Race or national origin.
There we go. See, this is actually a true statement. More money equals more American cheese, more canola oil good.
It would take time to get used to, as was the
You ever have halloumi cheese, brie cheese, or parmesan? What is this? I speak English. I don't even know what these words are. Are they cheese? Or are they just like abstract European concepts? Abstract European philosophical concepts? I don't know.
The friction that.
And yeah, that's true too, Dave. Does more money relate to better spending or more waste potentiality? I would think that if you were to start overloading, if you were to start just dumping money into a school district, what would happen is it's just wastage. I think that's kind of proven. And yeah, and like better spending, there's no such thing as like you have to give people a limited amount of money for the spending to improve. So you can't just give more money and expect and continuously feed in more money and expect spending to actually be better. Probably would never have to improve. It's Hogwarts spells. That makes sense.
Was caused right after the passing of that law, but at that point it's been codified, and then through those next 3 decades of education of telling basically the populace, hey, your neighbor is the same as you under the U.S. Constitution. U.S. Constitution, it would smooth out over time. All this to say, everyone in America has the ability, the opportunity, the potential drive to pursue any career field, entrepreneur chance, employment, resource, job, etc. in the United States. Redlining, in that sense, is not a real viable stopping point, because.
But that's like, once again, this is not the argument that's being made. Redlining bad because redlining means limited source of cash flow, which means bad school districts because no money. So, and bad school district equal bad culture.
even with its banning, and sure, you may have effects of it, but that's really
And see, this is the thing, like within the whole atheistic kind of, what would be the proper word? I gotta fucking Google this word just to make sure. I won't accidentally misuse this word. Yeah, so okay, was the correct one. So in this kind of atheistic ethos, right? It's what becomes the source of morality? Well, intellect becomes the source of morality. The source of morality, the ability to reason and to produce to be logical. So, where do you get that ability to do that? Well, you would get it from school. So, school becomes the church within the atheistic ethos. School is church within. This is why he thinks that if you send people to school and they get better education, that makes them better people. Doesn't necessarily do that. I would argue that a lot of the communist people were probably extremely intelligent, probably more intelligent than me, but they still managed to, do a lot of really fucked up things.
up to the fact that he did mention education, but that's
Where does logic come from? It comes from God. Because without, yeah.
just it. If you learn,
But with them, logic is just something they have. It's just granted to them. They don't have a source for logic. It's just a tool that they use to rationalize things.
that you have the opportunity, you have the ability to go set out for yourself and be better, which is where this whole thing comes from in terms of systemic racism, and telling basically an entire populace that they can't do more with themselves because of subjective, at this point, subjective effects of past deeds. The fact that at this point they can, that is the main point of contention when talking about whether or not systemic racism exists. When you tell an entire populace that they can do something, and you encourage them to go forth and at least attempt it, you can't really call in systemic racism when not only can they do it, but a lot of them.
Yeah, he's just overcomplicating this. I mean, again, is what the argument boils down to: money, more money equal more good. That's the basic logic. He's not really contending with that.
Have done it. You have many examples. You have Clarence Thomas, you have Jasmine Crockett, you have all of these. Those are just
Is logic mind dependent? No, it sources from God. God grounds logic. He grounds everything. He grounds reality.
two examples of people who, in a sense, have made it. They came from essentially, and those people came from either the slums or in I think Ben Carson's case. I'm not too sure on that. However, they are all very well renowned, very well renowned and very well educated people. So even though you have a population that still is in the ghettos, there's other reasons for why.
Okay, he's kind of just repeating
that
himself
they're really
like a bunch.
they're all, even I learned that I still have all of these opportunities, these tools around your people. Been this whole you now, and therefore you can action make it. The fact that we have that things.
Okay, so like at this part, because I've kind of skipped through it, so I'm not gonna I'm understanding the gist of what he's saying, because it's hard to understand what he's even arguing. I think what the argument was here is that just because red line there does not mean you are automatically unable to do something. That's fine. That could be a good argument, but it's also conceding, it doesn't actually contend with redlining itself. You'd have to attack redlining, not the effects of redlining.
Barack Obama's election into being the president in 2008 meant that we can do anything. We have the opportunity to. There, all of the tools are there at our disposal. We just need to use it. And what continues to happen is that, especially with people on the left, we're told that we're just told.
As far as the prompt goes, systematic racism does exist. It's called DEI. Yeah, systematic racism does exist through DEI. So, but First Amendment's never going to make that argument. So, this is something I think that Tomahawk could have done. He could have just conceded the prompt and said, yes, systematic racism does exist as DEI, and try to win the debate through rhetoric. But if he's trying to compete with the prompt itself, he could have just attacked that, the idea that money equal good.
Oh, just from birth that you can't do it. Just from birth, it's pretty much set in stone. When that's not the case. It was the case before, in pre 1964, but after the passing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, basically telling everyone that you can make it in America. It doesn't matter what you look like, doesn't matter where you came from, you can make it. All that's left is simply knowing how you can make it. And that's where institutions
trying to shame redlining. Well, what I'm getting at is that he's not really. He's just he's attacking the surface of the argument, and he's not attacking like the argument itself, right? He's like dipping his toes in the water. He's not actually trying to dive down into the water to contend with the root of the argument. And the root of the argument is money equal good, but also that redline equal bad. Those are two of the root arguments. Redline bad. Why redline bad? Because more money equal good. So even if he was, so that's what I mean by like just attacking the money, the idea that money equal good. Because if he's attacking like the idea of redlining itself, the way to attack it is the effects of it being bad, and his argument would be that money equal good. So you would attack money equal good, but he's attacking that the effects of redlining doesn't exist.
Tend to institutions, and particularly on the left, tend to falter and tend to keep that information away from Black people. Systemic racism couldn't really exist when everyone today now has the opportunity to succeed, now has the means of which to succeed for themselves. They just need to go out there and take it. The right encourages this. They say, we will give you the tools. We teach you how these things work. We teach you the way that in which you are able to do so. Whereas the left does not give you those tools. They just say, well, you just can't do it. Through things like redlining, because you live in a poorer town, you just can't do it. When the whole point of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is to tell you categorically that you can. I'm going to end off saying, like, so this is systemic racism. If it were to be a real problem in today's day and age, it's a problem. Therefore, it's a problem that needs to be solved. And if you can't categorically solve this problem or lessen it to the point where it becomes a non-issue, why continue to fight? Why continue to bring it up as a point of issue, if not to gain something from it, from the fact that of the issue itself and what it causes? For that, I yield my time.
Alrighty, thank you for that opening statement, Tomahawk. And that will wrap up the opening statements from both sides. We're going to move into the rebuttal here. Each debater.
Hell, dude, I'm barely able to keep my eyes open. I'm just gonna go to sleep. I'm actually gonna. I have to go to bed. I have to work today, anyways, so I have to go to bed pretty soon, anyway. But I'm tired. I'm going to bed. Thank you guys for showing up. Appreciate any of the new people that stick around. But I'm going to bed. I usually play video games and troll fucking troll real hard. Today I got in a deep philo sperging mood. Yeah, I'm going to bed. You guys have a good one.